In the previous season of Bugcatcher, we left each other on a cliffhanger. The cliffhanger was about Vengeance Demon Hunter, because Vengeance Demon Hunter was exposed of benefiting from a bug. Just like Marksmanship, just like Windwalker, they were having a bug within their spec which were making them overperform, perform better than intended, or differently than intended. So Marksmanship and Windwalker had gotten their bugs fixed. They have been given some compensation, so we left each other at the end of Season 1 mentioning, is Blizzard going to give a compensation to Vengeance? Are they just gonna say, whoops, sorry, you can keep this bug? Or they're gonna do something different? So Blizzard came out with a statement where they actually went above and beyond. They haven't just fixed this bug, therefore nerfing Vengeance Demon Hunter, and giving them a compensation buff. They actually went on ahead and spread the changes to all the tanks, not just Vengeance, which we will get to this, but in the end it's basically a double nerf to Vengeance, because not only they get weaker, all the other competition, all the other tanks get stronger as well. So, in their statement, they start the statement saying, yep, sorry, there was a bug where Vengeance Demon Hunters were taking less magical damage than intended. They tried to explain, to excuse themselves, why it took them so long to apply any changes, and the reasoning is that mid-tier nerfs can cause entire groups to potentially struggle with raid or dungeon content that they could previously complete without issue. Imagine you have a group of friends you run Mythic Plus with, you have your Vengeance tank, and then out of nowhere, Vengeance get gutted. Yeah, sure, Vengeance was OP and needed to be nerfed, but people, went on ahead to play it, to spend time, to level up the Covenant, the Renown, gear up. So getting nerfed mid-tier would have felt a little bit bad. Even worse, imagine if you're raiding and you have like 2 tanks and they both get nerfed horribly mid-tier, it would have been pretty bad. So Blizzard used this explanation as to why they waited a little bit longer, that the tier became a little bit more stale. However, because of the magnitude of the bug, as I mentioned myself in the video talking about this is not a minor thing that Blizzard can just let go for like months. It's a pretty major one. Because of the magnitude of the bug, combined with extensive feedback about the current strength of Vengeance relative to their tanks, we feel that we need to act quickly. We therefore plan to fix this bug during scheduled weekly maintenance next week, so in 3 days, 4 days. To reduce the impact to Vengeance tanks and their groups, we plan to make an additional change to offset the bug fix, so the compensation. We also want to address the feedback about overall tank survivability in Shadowlands, especially in Mythic Keystone dungeons. Yes, of course, it's much more of a bigger problem than raids. With the fix to Vengeance, we will increase the Vengeance Demon Hunter's passive Demonic Wards by 5%, but we will also adjust all other tank specializations passives, like Veteran of the Third War for Blood Death Knights, to add an effect that reduces overall damage taken by 10%. So at the end of this, we get a picture. The picture that says every single tank except Vengeance is going to be taking 10% less damage from all sources, physical and magical. So it's just a 10% buff for all other tanks. Vengeance only gets a 5% buff to their physical damage reduction, so half of what the other tanks are getting, and they are getting a nerf to their magical damage reduction. Because yes, the 5% buff to Demonic Wards is also going to protect them for magical damage, so they get a +5, but then they lose the 15% extra magical damage reduction they were benefiting from the bug. So it's gonna total out to be a -10, roughly -10, because we don't have the actual precise number. It's gonna be roughly 10%, which is why, case in point, I mentioned this being effectively a double nerf for Vengeance. They aren't just getting weaker, all the other tanks are getting stronger. As mentioned before, this was a pretty big bug. It wasn't something that Blizzard could have let go. We went over this in the previous video when you looked at the damage a Vengeance Demon Hunter was taking, and you're like, okay, the actual unmitigated damage before any damage reduction is taken into place, it's 8,659. And here the log shows Vengeance is taking 5,489. But if we go and take the total damage before mitigation and we multiply it by all the sources which apply damage reduction, we have Devotion Aura, we have the Let Go of the Past passive of Pelagos, we have the Demonic Wards passive of the Demon Hunter, we have the Versatility, and even the Vantus Rune. The total number is 6,469, which is almost 20% more damage that you should have been taking. Now, of course, this turned out to be not as bad, so this is good for Demon Hunters. You weren't benefiting from this big of a bug. You're not going to be that much weaker now that it's been fixed, because Let Go of the Past was also fixed. In the previous season of Bugcatchers, Blizzard also caught Let Go of the Past. you can see here the character with Let Go of the Past active. You can see the buff icon was taking 1205 damage, and then as soon as Let Go of the Passive expires, the damage goes down. It goes to 1169. This is because the bug was making it so that the Let Go of the Past was giving you a modifier aura to more damage taken, plus 1%, instead of what it was supposed to be, which is what was auto-fixed into, which was minus 1%. So now you have a working Let Go of the Past, which effectively reduces your magical damage taken by 3%. So we will get what was expected. We will get the fix of the bug plus the compensation. This is not going to be as big of a compensation if you compare them to the Windwalker and the Marksmanship, what they got. In their case, you could even look at the brighter side. For example, Marksmanship have gotten better single target than compared to their nerf, and also technically Kyrian Marksmanship Hunter was buffed, and only Night Fae Hunter was basically severely nerfed. Similarly, also Windwalker. For Vengeance, the only glass half full, if you really want to look at something here, is your physical damage increase. Your weakness as a Vengeance Demon Hunter was your physical damage. You were more of the specialized spec for taking less magical damage. You know, your Firebrand works on all damage reduction. You're getting a 40% less damage taken by the targets on Firebrand, which includes magical damage. So that was kind of your thing. So getting a slight increase on your physical damage reduction is nice because of how much weaker you were compared to their tanks. The reason why I said it's worse than Marksmanship and Windwalker is because Marksmanship and Windwalker, once they got their compensation, didn't also have every other DPS spec buffed, every other competitor, which is what Vengeance Demon Hunter will end up having, because Blood Death Knight, Guardian, Brewmaster, Prot Paladin and Prot Warrior are all getting buffed. So the compensation to Vengeance will feel much more sour and bitter than what Marksmanship and Windwalker got before. Now, after going through the actual announcement, the actual explanation of the changes, let's go and look at if and what are these changes going to do to the tank specs, if, you know, some of them are going to be significantly better, if Vengeance is going to die or something similar. And the first thought that comes to mind when you look at this is it is likely there is going to be more importance now to be put on damage, particularly when it comes to Mythic Plus. When you start bridging the gap, when you start reaching the point, essentially the top of the mountain, the top of the hill, where you can start going downhill, from that point onwards, you start putting less value on your defensiveness and more value on your offense. This has happened before in BFA. More defensive tanks are going to be fine until you reach a certain point, and then when you are tanky enough, then you can do the same pulls that you were doing before. You can start exchanging some of that tankiness because you keep scaling. Your stats keep becoming bigger, your legendaries, your soul binds, your conduits kept scaling higher and higher. You can start, you know, taking some of them away, some of the defensive ones away, and add in the offensive ones, the more damage, the more damaging ones. When you look at damage, you have the thing. Protection Paladin has the most damage out of all tanks. They have kept the most damage out of all tanks despite the amount of nerfs they have received. They have the most damage in single target, they have the most damage in AoE. Regardless of what they do, they remain at the top. Protection Paladin, and this is something we're going to see and compare to other tank specs, has the advantage of having talents which actually can give them damage, and even legendaries that can give them damage. A very good example is comparing Red Thirst to Righteous Protector. You're a Blood Death Knight and you have a talent, a last row talent, which tells you, hey, you can reduce the cooldown of Vampiric Blood for every runic power spent. The problem is, Vampiric Blood doesn't actually give you damage. It's just a defensive, a flat-out defensive. So if you wanted more damage, this talent isn't going to give you that. Whereas Paladin, basically the exact same talent that works in the exact same way, each holy power spent reduces the remaining cooldown on Avenging Wrath is damage. Because Paladin has the luxury, similar but to a smaller degree, Guardian Druid, they both have the luxury of having a defensive cooldown also tied to damage. Incarnation or Berserk for Guardian Druid and Avenging Wrath for Protection Paladin. The same can go for in the case of Prot Paladin for something like Seraphim, which just showers you in stats. Yes, those stats can be converted to damage reduction, they can be converted to block, versatility, which is more damage reduction, but that's also damage. You know, haste is also damage, crit is also damage, and verse is also damage. This is something that not many other tanks can have. Even the legendaries, you know, in single target, Protection Paladins can just go Med Paragon to extend their Avenging Wrath. You know, a window of damage. You know, the window of damage of the second strongest single target spec, Guardian Druid has a burst of almost 9000 DPS. They take Heart of the Wild to empower either their Feral or their Balance affinity, and then they go and do their Convoke the Spirits. That's what gives them the 9k DPS burst. And that's the second best. You know, when the second best is at 9k and you are the best of them as a paladin and you can reach 14k, almost 14k DPS with your burst, it's a pretty big difference. You know, this is with the bigger burst with Ashen Hallow. If you go down to Divine Toll, it is definitely lower, but that's how high the burst of Prot Paladin can go. That's how sad it looks like when a 99 percentile Prot Paladin is close to a 96 percentile Enhancement Shaman. You know, other tanks don't have this luxury. When you look at Brewmaster, for example, Bob and Weave just increases your stagger duration. You have Light Brewing, which reduces the cooldown of your brews by 20%, which is only minorly relevant, but just slightly more damage. You know, Rushing Jadewind, you're basically locked in this talent even when you're playing single target damage. High Tolerance, you're also locked in this talent, and at best it's going to give you some more haste for a little while in boss fights for single target damage. And this change for being more defensive is very good for Paladin, because Paladin is already very high in damage. What they lack is damage reduction, is tankiness, is not being squishy and just having their health bar jump all around. Of course, the bigger issue is that they would need a cooldown. You know, they would need something to use every pull. They right now only have Ardent Defender, which is just not quite enough to match up with something like Firebrand from Vengeance Demon Hunter. What every tank would want is something like Demonic of Vengeance, the ability to have a talent which gives you 6 seconds of your strongest defensive, you know, an ability of a Prot Paladin to go 6 seconds into Guardian of the Ancient Kings, for example, whenever they use Wings, for example, or whenever they use a 1 minute cooldown, maybe Seraphim, maybe Divine Toll, you know, something that gives them 6 seconds of Guardian. That would make them much better, for example. But even this is a good start, starting from giving them a flat out 10% less damage taken with the damage they already have is a very good start. The other two tanks, which are already doing fine, you know, more or less fine, were Guardian and Brewmaster. Guardian and Brewmaster don't do as much damage as a Protection Paladin. They don't do as much damage as a Vengeance Demon Hunter when it comes to AoE, when it comes to Mythic Plus. Just by looking at keys, Vengeance Demon Hunters have the highest DPS in those keys at higher level. It is also particularly good for them because they are already tanky as well. I've heard someone say, actually this is bad for tanky tanks, because then if you give more defensiveness to others, then their tankiness, their niche of being very tanky gets devalued. It's actually the opposite. If you give them more base tankiness, their actual tankiness that they scale with, their talents, their passives and whatnot, is going to become much stronger. This is going to allow them to risk even more, to take away more tankiness even more, and push for more damaging talents. The issue, as I mentioned, is that Guardian and Brewmaster, particularly Brewmaster, don't have as many talents that they can go for, or even as many legendaries that they can just switch in to become more offensive. You know, Brewmaster is already playing with Stormstout Last Keg. Guardian is already playing with Ursoc's Fury Remembered, which is integral for their Incarnation combo, and they do also have a couple of talents that they want to run with that, so there isn't much room for them to do more damage. Brewmaster is possibly even more locked into certain powerful talents, so it's not that they can say, oh, I am more tanky now, I can just switch a couple of talents and go even more ham in damage. But the worst ones, the ones at the bottom, currently at the bottom, are Blood Death Knight and Protection Warrior. So their damage is the lowest when it comes to single target and when it comes to AoE. Actually, when it comes to single target, Protection Warrior is kind of even with Vengeance Demon Hunter. Either way, it's low nonetheless. This buff, you know, certainly helps them, but you need to look at, you know, the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is that as a tank, you are fighting for your job against other tanks. So if both of you gain a buff of equal measure, so if both of you become 10% stronger, you have to look at who was stronger before. You know, who is scaling better over time with this buff. Because if you are an underplayed Blood Death Knight and I tell you, yo dude, you are 10% tankier, you're happy. If I tell you, yo dude, you are 10% tankier just like every other tank, is it good? You know, is it even... should I be happy about this? For Blood Death Knight, I don't think so, because their damage is so low that it's not that being tankier is going to unleash their inner DPS personality. They just don't have the damage right now. So even if they become tankier, they are not going to be in the tankiness level of a Guardian Druid, even of a Brewmaster, or a Vengeance with their Firebrand build. So this is going to help, this is going to be nice for Blood DKs, but not really much of anything is going to change for them. For Protection, it's going to be different. Protection has received one of the bigger back-to-back buffs over time, right? They have gotten a 10% buff to all damage, plus a 10% buff to the Thunderclap. Now they're getting a 10% overall buff to all their defensiveness. They certainly have the bigger chance to scale over time. Protection is already also a spec warrior, not just protection, arms and fury, that scale very well over the expansion with their secondary stats, with haste, protection also as well with mastery, so they're gonna have better options over time, over the tiers and the item levels to become stronger and stronger. For the time being, you know, we thought after 9.0.5 there would have been a resurgence of protection warriors. So far, we haven't seen one yet. Maybe it's a little bit early. Maybe after this round of buffs to all tanks, we're gonna be seeing it even more clearly, but for now we haven't. Overall, I do think this type of change to all tanks is benefiting Guardian, Brewmaster and Protection Paladin the most, because they were the one already in the middle, right below Vengeance Demon Hunter. So even just by logic, they are the ones more prone to take advantage of a nerf being given to Vengeance Demon Hunter and a buff being given to them. Protection Paladins, because they were the absolute squishiest, so this is gonna give them a new threshold that they can push themselves to, 10% more tankiness, and Brewmaster and Guardian, because they were already doing well in terms of tankiness, particularly Guardian Druid. I'm still not sold on the Guardian and Brewmaster's offensive possibilities so far. The switch that they can have in their builds to do more damage now that they are 10% tankier. I don't think they have much of any options compared to Protection Paladin, which has way more. At the very least, I'm happy we have seen a change. There was the legitimate fear that Blizzard wouldn't have changed anything to Vengeance Demon Hunter, would have just let this bug be. Apparently not. So at least we have the confirmation that even Blizzard thought this was a significant enough bug, which required a pretty hasty fix. The extra change to tanks was a welcome surprise, you can say, because really I had in mind Vengeance being fixed, but not on top of that having all the other tanks getting a bump up in performance, in strength. Not sure if I would have given 10% to them equally. Maybe Blizzard didn't want to risk it too much, you know, maybe they could have given 15% more physical damage reduction to Blood Death Knights, 15% more magical damage reduction to Protection Warriors, maybe even adding some overall damage increase, maybe even to DKs and Warriors as well, but I guess they stopped at the tankiness for now. We will see exactly just how badly or how well this is going to affect all these specs. For tomorrow, or maybe in a couple of days, we're going to also go through the updated results that we have gotten from raids and Mythic Plus after 9.0.5. We have touched it very early on in the effect it had to Assassination Rogue, in the effect it had to both Windwalker and Marksmanship that now got their compensation, so we can look at if the compensation actually changed something, as well as some other specs I had my eye on after 9.0.5, like Retribution, like Havoc Demon Hunter also, which was buffed in 9.0.5, and a few other specs, Frost Mage, yes, so we're gonna be looking at that eventually. So for now we can stop the video for the tanks. Overall I'm pretty happy about all of these changes. I hope you are as well. I don't think there are too many Vengeance Demon Hunters in the comments trying to claim that the nerf wasn't needed. I actually seen enough of them already, so please don't follow suit and complain as well. Come on guys. Some objectivity. You're still very strong and very likely the strongest, so just enjoy it for now, okay? See you guys soon, and in the meantime, man, poor Blood Death Knight. They just need a tiny bit more. Just a bit.